everyone. Welcome to this Open Applied Linguistics collaborative workshop, Exploring Open Scholarship in Practice, the TBLT Task Bank. We are so excited to have our esteemed speakers, Laura and Caitlyn, to walk us through the TBLT Task Bank website with exciting task-related activities. And let me now introduce them. Laura Gurzynski-Weiss is professor of Spanish and Portuguese at Indiana University. Her scholarship examines instructive second language acquisition, task-based language teaching, and individual differences, and appears in leading journals and edited volumes. Her recent work engages with open scholarship as a means of broadening participation and impact in applied linguistics. She is the founder and director of the Task-Based Language Learning Task Bank, an open access resource and international community. She currently serves as president of the International Association for Task-Based Language Teaching, holds editorial roles with Studies in Second Language Acquisition and the Language Learning and Language Teaching series, and is an advisor for us, Open Applied Linguistics, and the International Association for the Psychology of Language Learning. Caitlyn Pineault is a doctoral student in applied linguistics at Georgetown University. Her research interests include instructed second language acquisition, task-based language teaching, heritage language studies, and second language studies methodology. She has a recent co-authored article on heritage language speaker identity published in the Modern Language Journal. At Georgetown, she is a research assistant at the Assessment and Evaluation Language Resource Center. She is also the co-lead instructor of the Georgetown Starter 2023. Please join us in welcoming Laura and Caitlyn.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here, and thanks to those who are logged on live and those who are watching the video after the fact. So thank you for being here. We're going to get started first talking a little bit about the task bank itself, and then talking about how you might use it in your research and practice. So our talk title today is Exploring Open Scholarship in Practice, the TBLT Task Bank as one of the open scholarship initiatives that we have in applied linguistics. Before we get started, Caitlyn, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, that'd be great. I wanted to ask what your familiarization is with TBLT and the task bank. So maybe put in the chat how familiar you are with TBLT, if you've used the task bank. We'd love to know this as we move on, since we are a smaller group and able to do that. So the TBLT Language Learning Task Bank, the Task-Based Language Teaching Task Bank, is a site that really looks at TBLT tasks. And what I mean by that are tasks that fit 4 criteria. There's a primary focus on meaning, there's a real-world use of language, there's a non-linguistic outcome, so I want to get a time to meet, for example, or I want to get a bus ticket. And then the last one, oh, I forgot it, Caitlyn. What is it? Authentic?
The real world.
Yeah, real world. Thank you very much. So we have these criteria that make it a task, right? So tasks are really everything we do in real life. We order a coffee, we find the right Zoom link, for example, and we use language to achieve those tasks. So that's what I mean by TBLT tasks. And the reason it's so complicated is because we do use tasks all the day, all of the time in our regular life, right? So finding tasks for language teaching that adhere to these TBLT principles has historically been really challenging. If you search online for a language learning task, everything and anything will come up. So we founded the TBLT Language Learning Task Bank to really serve this need. So it was in response to TBLT implementation challenges. Both researchers and practitioners, because it is both a research paradigm and a pedagogical framework, were saying we're really excited about this. We really want to use TBLT, but we need more examples. So we created the TBLT Language Learning Task Bank as an educational repository that houses free downloadable tasks for empirical and pedagogical use. So if you're doing a TBLT study, you can go there and get a task. You could also, of course, go to IRIS if it's been used in a published study. Or if you're a teacher that really wants to use TBLT or has a great lesson that you've spent a lot of time and you're like, I can't be the only person that uses this, this is a site for you. So it's really this open access hub for TBLT stakeholders to share their resources, or at least that's how we thought it would be. That's how we started it out to be. Next slide, please. The three main stakeholders that we have are researchers and teachers, as I've mentioned so far, as well as teacher trainers. So I teach a teaching methodology class every fall at Indiana University. So our new graduate student instructors who teach our Spanish and Portuguese language classes at IU, they come through my methods class. And this is a site that also is existing to serve these pre-service or in-service teachers again. So we use them in teacher education, we use it for research, and we use it for teachers. These are the main stakeholders, although of course we're also always interested in policymakers and others that support language learning worldwide. So I'm going to pass it over to Caitlyn. Oh no, I'm going to do this part too. Sorry guys, it's early here. So we created it to be this educational repository in 2020, and 6 years later, it kind of evolved. So we had it as being an educational repository, kind of a storage site. And what it ended up being was more of a catalyst for communities of practice and teacher education. And so we meant it to be this place where people could upload and download, but it became much more of a conversation than we expected. And we find this in three different ways. We had both a local and global community of practice, and Caitlyn will talk about that in a minute, as well as teacher education uses of the task bank. And through this, we really created this vibrant social nexus rather than just an educational repository, which I think is quite common in terms of open access initiatives and something that really is encouraging in terms of why we should keep using this. And so just to visually create it, we had the task bank, and we're realizing that we have not just a repository, but a local and a global community of practice and teacher education. And we thought this is something that really can foster the collaboration and the dialogue between research and practice that, at least in TBLT, we're extremely committed to, right? So I'm doing this other project where we're talking about how TBLT is one of, if not the most, committed to research and practice because it is both simultaneously a research framework and a pedagogical framework. And then we also conceptualize the task bank as just one of the examples within the larger schemata of open applied linguistics or open scholarship initiatives in applied linguistics. And so we have just a few of them on here. I'm sure you'll definitely recognize Iris and Oasis. We also have Mural, Megan Driver's Mural, T-Cell Graphics, the TBLT YouTube channel. If you've not tried that out yet, I highly encourage you to do so. And of course, our own Open Applied Linguistics Research Network. So it's just part of this larger picture that we have going on in applied linguistics that's trying to serve this collaboration and this bidirectional dialogue between research and practice. And now I will turn it over to Caitlyn. So here you go.
Thank you, Laura. So with that kind of big picture overview of where we're going in this talk, I will now focus us once again on the task bank to share a little bit more about how we see it as an open repository, kind of strengthening connections between research and practice, specifically within TBLT. So the first two ways are grounded in the communities of practice that we've seen form over the past 6 years at both the local and the global level. And as I'm sure you've heard of, communities of practice broadly describes a group of individuals who share a concern or passion for something they do and learn about it as they interact regularly. Communities of practice are shown to be one space that support practitioners in developing new knowledge and practices, both outside language education, but also within language education. And over the years, as we have been involved in maintaining and engaging the task bank, as Laura mentioned, not just a repository, but more of a catalyst, we've seen it bring together groups of people who are committed to just that. They're committed to TBLT, and they're curious about learning either to research it or to implement it in their classrooms. And the task bank has been a space for them to interact more regularly. So starting with a little bit more about the emergent local community of practice that we have seen form through the task bank review process. So when tasks are submitted to the task bank, the project assistant, myself, or the project director, Laura, assigns 2 reviewers to that submission. And the reviewers are either the advisory board members for the open repository, or starting now almost 2 years ago, a network of TBLT scholar volunteers. And so while each uploader can only see the tasks that they themselves have submitted. The administrator and the reviewer can see all the tasks that have been submitted. And so this queue kind of is a little bit of a snapshot of where we understand tasks to be, what they are, where they can be used. And so reviewers then, as well as the uploaders and the admin team, are the primary members of this local community of practice. And we see this community of practice engaged in interacting with each other during both the initial review process. So all the task bank reviewers are committed to reviewing at least 2 tasks per semester. They're welcome to self-assign themselves additional tasks that they find interesting or tag each other in tasks that they find relevant to ongoing projects or areas of expertise. And because task uploaders are encouraged to submit tasks in the language in which they were originally used, as the admin team, we prioritize making sure that reviewers are assigned based on the languages in their repertoire, as well as their familiarity with the task's intended use context. And so sometimes there is an iterative revision process, and this creates more space for these members of the local community of practice to interact. And this all takes place in the Task Bank review portal. So here, if you're not familiar, this is what Laura was sharing verbally about what a task on the TBLT task bank is and what components it involves. And so this is the worksheet that all the reviewers fill out for the task submissions that are assigned to them. So in addition to the binary yes/no evaluation, there's also open space where reviewers can leave either suggestions for edits that are required or optional to consider. And once they submit these, it forms kind of what you would expect to see on a social media kind of wall posting, where you can have kind of written dialoguing about the characteristics of this task, what it contains, whether or not it fulfills these criteria, does it bring any new considerations to the picture. And what we've seen in this local community of practice are ideas and insights that we feel really drive TBLT forward as a researched pedagogy and a framework for investigating how kind of language development occurs in instructed contexts. So briefly here, sharing kind of 3 principal insights to give you a sense of the sorts of conversations happening concurrently in this local community of practice. The first kind of area relates to the impact of intended context in learners on the task design considerations. So, for example, does the fact that a task is taking place in an elementary school make it meet criteria differently than if that same task was being used for adult language learners? For example, 5-year-olds who are learning French in kindergarten might really be concerned with figuring out what a circle is and where there are circles in their lives. But for adults, this no longer serves any sort of meaningful communicative purpose because they all know what circles are. With this group, thinking again of maybe younger, more novice level learners, we also have had really fascinating conversations about the role of emerging linguistic resources and what linguistic resources these beginning novice learners are bringing to the table. Relatedly, our local community of practice is also regularly engaged in conversations about the essential characteristics of what makes a task, are all the kind of criteria and questions that both the uploaders and the reviewers reviewing kind of static? Are they all prioritized equally, or are some characteristics more influential in kind of making a task the kind of powerful tool for language development and language learning that we think it is? And then last but not least, this local community of practice has also been discussing the need to prioritize task-based assessment and the importance of making task-based assessment tools more widely available. So all these rich conversations are coming out of the fact that the task bank is not just a static repository, but because it is open and because it creates opportunities for scholars and practitioners who might not otherwise be able to connect or might not have a common ground to kind of talk on and talk about. It is giving that and creating kind of these valuable kind of conversations that push TBLT forward. We also see, in addition to the local community of practice, a global community of practice. And this is kind of forming in the continuing professional development space that the TBLT Task Bank kind of creates and supports. So in this global community of practice, you can see that the who is a little bit broader. It includes researchers, pre and in-service teachers, teacher educators, and even students themselves. And there are opportunities for connection both on a monthly basis and a semi-annual basis in the virtual TBLT Task Bank workshop series, which meets monthly, as well as the Let's Talk Task feature in the task journal. So sharing a little bit more about those spaces, in case anyone here in the audience or watching this recording later is interested in joining. The virtual workshop series is something the Task Bank hosts monthly. There are 45-minute workshops that are dedicated to a shared focal topic of interest among the TBLT Task Bank kind of users and stakeholders. So Laura and I conduct surveys regularly around the beginning and the end of the year, and then we invite guest speakers to come share a little bit about their area of expertise, whether that be a kind of topic in research or kind of a skill set in practice. They give a 15-minute guest lecture, and then we've got the majority of the time, about 30 minutes for discussion. And so these groups have been really vibrant spaces for kind of building bridges and connections virtually among the stakeholders involved in TBLT. And some of the focal conversations that have been of a special interest are featured in then the Let's Talk Tasks section of the task journal. This is an open access dialogic feature, and it's situated around some sort of focal task. Often these are focal tasks that are presented as exemplars in the virtual workshop series. And from that focal task, which is sent through the review process of the task bank and housed there, the kind of dialogic nature of this feature invites diverse stakeholder perspectives, so all the stakeholders that Laura mentioned at the beginning, to reflect on this task's utility and relevance. So 2 spaces, one, again, more written and dialogic, and the other virtual but face-to-face, all talking about kind of what does it mean to kind of implement TBLT in a classroom context, what does it mean to use TBLT as a research framework, and how can we better support language learning and language teaching. And so ultimately, within this global community of practice, we've seen increased opportunities for conversation, connections, and collaborations. And to share one most recently, this is from the last TBLT conference that was hosted last April. And it was looking at the use of critical TBLT across the Americas. You can see the conference program snippet there, and the presenters and scholars involved in sharing this work actually connected through the task bank. And you'll find a number of the critical tasks that these individuals have submitted to the task bank that you can use for your own purpose. And certainly keep an eye out for these individuals at future conferences as they continue reflecting on critical TBLT in diverse contexts. In addition to the 2 communities of practice that I just detailed, we've also seen the task bank as an open site to have potential for supporting teacher education initiatives. And these education initiatives support both in-service and pre-service teachers. They can take a variety of different formats, but what they have in common is they're sites for connecting research and practice, and which have been shown to be especially crucial within the TBLT scholarship about what it means to implement TBLT. And so because the task bank is open, it makes itself available to anybody involved in teacher education efforts and initiatives. And so this might be teacher education in the form of coursework, or teacher education in the form of professional development workshops, which can span, to be a month intensive online to, a week or a 3-day intensive in person, supporting graduate students or pre and in-service teachers. And so we're going to focus on two today, one of which took place within a post-secondary institution and was in the form of coursework, and the other that was a more independent initiative and had external funding sources. So to look first at the example of how TBLT was integrated, how the task bank was integrated into coursework, we see it being used to promote and kind of inspire collaborative and reflective pedagogic activities for pre-service teachers. So as you see here, listed here, the task bank has been used to develop task adaptation skills, as well as provide kind of a site where pre-service teachers and teachers who are new to TBLT, regardless of their experience before in classroom context, can learn about the complexities of task design. So the two slide decks you see here are also made available on the task bank. We invite you to scan the QR code or visit the task bank in action section. In addition to coursework, the TBLT Task Bank has also been featured in professional development workshops for in-service teachers who are a little bit more experienced. And here the Task Bank plays an invaluable role in providing teacher educators with materials that they can use in interactive and hands-on activity that support, in the case of the Georgetown Star Talk program that I'm involved with, they supported the teacher's ability to design a sequence of tasks that were kind of organized in an intentional way, and also prompt continued critical awareness of task features. And so together, both the coursework and the intensive professional development workshops that I just briefly explained shows how the task bank can connect more novice TBLT stakeholders with more experienced community members, and also show where teachers who are new to TBLT can continue to connect with the TBLT community and get ongoing support. So with that, I'll pass it back to Laura. Oops, I think you might still be muted, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to dive into the task bank together. If you haven't already visited the site, please go ahead and do that to www.thetaskbank.com. You can click the next animation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to think about what are some variables or keywords that you would use to search for a task that would be useful for you. So you could think about a task that you want to use in research if you're going to do some kind of intervention or you want to do some kind of observational study. Or you could think about, I'm going to teach a language course soon, or we'll teach a teacher training session soon, and we're going to be focusing on these different topics. Put your search term in or search terms in and see what kind of tasks come up. And if you're willing, we'd also love to see what those terms are in the chat as well. So I'll give you a second to do that. We've had a couple people try things like very TBLT focused input providing, output prompting. We've had anxiety, for example, motivation. We've had people say things like the subjunctive, critical tasks. And what I love about the task bank too is that it is live. So it is something that, like Caitlyn was saying, it's dynamic, it's responsive, it's flexible, it's by the community and for the community. So if you're a human being, you're part of the community, we're here to serve you. And so we want to know what kinds of search criteria would also be useful to you. If you don't see a task that serves your need, this is a perfect feedback moment to you to say, oh, I have things like this that I could put up that could be adjusted to meet the TBLT criteria. I can upload this to the task bank and make sure that it's serving. So as Caitlyn was saying, for critical tasks, for example, Ellen Serafini gave a beautiful workshop that you can see on the task bank in the tab Task Bank in Action, talking about critical tasks. A couple colleagues from Brazil were on the call on the Zoom meeting and said, oh, we have tasks like this too. They uploaded their tasks, and now we have also a code on there, a search term that is critical tasks. So again, if you see things that are not quite available to you in the way that you want them, we can make that happen. Oh, great. So we said vocabulary and adults. Those are great ones. One that I've done recently are critical tasks. Caitlyn, what about you? What have you looked at recently?
I enjoy looking at tasks for younger learners or looking at
Yes.
tasks by anticipated proficiency level.
And then for proficiency level, proficiency level. We have CFER, for example. We have ACTFL, so both the European Common European Framework and then the US version, and we are always open to that. So let's go ahead and switch to the next screen, Caitlin. And then there are two other steps we wanted to mention. So once you put in your search terms, or you can just browse the tasks that we have available as well, for example, but you might see some of the options. So Caitlin had this beautiful picture of 4 different tasks. So you might come up with something that says like lost and found tasks, for example. There's always a summary, there's a description and goals, and then you can see what kinds of language focuses there might be. We also offer the opportunity to submit your tasks in the original language. So if you have Russian tasks, for example, or tasks that facilitate the learning of Russian, we will have you submit as you created the tasks, and then we will find reviewers to work with you on the task. And so that was Caitlin was talking about the local community of practice between the reviewers and the uploader. And that's something that we really love to have too. So you're not just waiting for the long review of an article, for example, behind a paywall that only a certain number of people will be able to see and benefit from. But on the task bank, it's something that is available freely for everyone on the internet. And you still have that back and forth conversation with stakeholders that give you really good feedback, saying that, oh, this is ready to go as is, or, oh, you know what, with this small tweak, this would meet the criteria, or, you know what, this task isn't quite what the task bank does, but check out these complementary sites. If you go to the front page of our website, on the bottom, it says complementary sites, and it can help you figure out if the task bank is the right spot or if other websites might be. So you review the options of which tasks you might want to consider, and then the fourth step is to download the resources. They're all freely available for download, so you'll either see a Google Drive link, for example, a YouTube link, just Word documents, PDFs. We currently don't have a standard way of uploading the task. That's also something that we're working on to innovate, to provide both open, you can submit however you'd like to, or use our template if you want to make it really easy for yourself. One of the other innovations that we're currently working on and excited about is we're partnering with Fred Poole at Michigan State, as well as Roger Hilabert at the Universitat de Barcelona, to see how we can incorporate AI into the review process. So if you submit a task and you want it to be reviewed with those 4 criteria, and the first step will be AI looking at your tasks, saying, you know what, you have these 3 that are great, but you don't have the structure. For example, it's just a task. You need to have a pre or a post task, or something that extends it a bit more for the learners. And AI can either just give you that feedback and you work on it yourself, or we're going to also pilot it giving you some feedback too. So that's something that's coming up later this year as well. So you can do these. This is how you work through the task bank, and you can also go to help on the taskbank.com, and it can walk you through how to set up a task bank account, how to navigate this, and really go step by step if you wanted to see how that works. And during the question and answer period, we're also happy to do that. So let's go to the next slide. So as Caitlin was saying, it started out as this open science repository and really grew into something so much more than we ever could have hoped for. There's more than 26,000 people that have used the task bank, or 26,000 engagements, I should say. And what Leo and Marsden have said in 2024 is really what we've seen, that open access is not just good for research, it's also good for researchers, right? So it really helps us identify and refine issues in TBLT. We see those same themes, like what is an authentic task for younger learners versus for university learners, for refugee learners, right? We can see these same types of themes that happen in journals happen in real time, but in a much more diverse and rich and live conversation. So it's something that's not just good for our work and looks good, but it's actually much more beneficial for the work that we're doing too. Next animation, please. And then we can also see that this active integration of open access platforms, in our case, the task bank, really is this metaphorical step or bridge between theory and practice, in our case for TBLT, but we think this can be an example of how open access platforms can really do so much more for the field than we think of as in terms of just an educational repository or storage site. It really is this living community and bi-directional dialogue. Next slide, please. So this, of course, also adds to some of the bigger questions. So in 2020, you can see our usage map. In 2026, we're getting much more diverse still places to go. This brings us to some of the larger questions that we see echoed throughout open applied linguistics. How do we sustain and grow open access platforms? The biggest component is that it is a nonprofit, right? I just pay for the site with my research funding, and Caitlyn and I and everybody else involved is giving our time as a volunteer with a small stipend for the grad student who's working on it, Caitlyn. But other than that, it's all volunteer work, right? And so that is the biggest issue, is how do you keep asking people for their time and their expertise? Can you come review a task? Come upload your task? We have to keep making this more visible and making sure that it's of value, right? So if you come to our task bank workshop, you have the offer of getting a certificate. If you submit a certificate of engagement. If you give a presentation, we invite you to also do a feature in the Let's Talk task section. So an open access publication. You can have lines on your CV as a reviewer, as an uploader. You can have that engagement in your scholarship of teaching or your service to the profession. So there's different ways of communicating the value. And I hope that as we continue to refine that, we'll have more and more participation and it just becomes more of a habit. In terms of developing teacher-researcher empirical collaborations, this is also something that I think is incredibly important, that it's not just this local and global community practice within TBLT, but we connect to other options and other communities that exist within our realm of TBLT. So there's this teacher education working group led by Laura Bryfonski at Georgetown, Javi Gutierrez at the University of Alberta, and Greg Ogilvie also at Alberta. And it's a worldwide group that gets together teachers and practitioners to talk about research questions, issues in the classroom, and we kind of collaborate back and forth with different initiatives within the realm of TBLT. And finally, within TBLT Task Bank, we're also committed to deepening connections with allied organizations, such as this Open ILO-REN. I know that it was mentioned before, I'm an advisor for it, but it's really a two-way learning environment as well, right? So how can we learn from each other people that are doing open access initiatives, other open access repositive, other open AL scholarship, and also from those that are using the task bank. We love to get emails. We love to have people just put in the chat, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, could we do this? I'm teaching a TBLT seminar next spring, and if no one gets to it before then, and please, you're welcome to, if you have the time, we'd love to revisit the criteria that we have in terms of how to categorize tasks, which are most used, how can we keep putting educational things, what do we mean by an input focused task, for example, and make it not just the static thing, but this educational side as well. Next slide, please. So I wanted to announce, like we said, and if you can hit it one more time, thanks, Caitlin. Within the TBLT scope of how open applied linguistics functions, throughout this work, I noticed that there are so many different really phenomenal open initiatives, open scholarship initiatives in applied linguistics. And unless you know exactly where they are and how to use them, it can be overwhelming, right? So I am putting together an edited volume. It's contracted with Open Access Applied Linguistics Press, which is the publisher of Luke Plonsky, who's one of the other advisors for this Open Applied Linguistics REN. And we're going to be putting together open scholarship initiatives, just kind of, there's going to be at least 30 different initiatives looking at, when it comes to repositories, for example, community building, communicating research to practitioners, research practice debates, things like that. So there's going to be a lot of different open scholarship initiatives within our applied linguistics community. And the whole purpose of it is to be a hands-on guide. So every initiative is going to describe who their stakeholders are, what their motivation was for founding, how to use it, what kind of metrics they collect to make sure that they're serving who they're supposed to be serving. There's going to be how-to videos associated with it, infographics to make this as user-friendly as possible. And then later on in the summary and the synthesis, I'm going to be providing flowcharts on, okay, this is how these relate to each other. If you're doing this, try this. If you're doing this in your practice, for example, consider these. And so that way we're trying to demystify and collaborate, de-silo, if you will, these open scholarship initiatives. And I'm really excited to work with Caitlin on the Task Bank chapter, and she has a couple others in there as well. So please do keep that on your radar. It's coming out next year. Next slide, please. So that's what we have for you today. We're happy to take your questions, give you some ideas for how to use the Task Bank in your research and practice. And we just want to end with a giant invitation. You can see our the paper version of this talk in the latest issue of Task. We're also happy to share it with you here. You can email us at help@thetaskbank.com, on Facebook, at Instagram. So wherever you are online, we hope to be. If we are missing one of your key areas of engagement, please also let us know because we'd be honored to get that together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura and Caitlyn, for a fantastic presentation and introduction of the features of TaskBank. And even though I've been in open applied linguistics for so long, there are still, there are some amazing features that I don't know about TaskBank, that I didn't know that you will all the tasks get reviewed, and and I think that's an amazing effort, and knowing this will make people be assured of the qualities of the tasks in the task bank. And just by random searching of some tasks that I just did on the website, I realized that some tasks were uploaded by scholars, like they already published a paper on that, and they use the task as the instrument and data collection, part of their data collection procedure. And they will not only describe the task on their paper and upload to OSF or other repositories. Some of them will also upload the you know the Word document or the PDFs directly to TaskBank, and it is described in absolute detail, like the age group you can use it with, the proficiency level you can use it with, and what kinds of language skills you can practice with the task. So I absolutely amazed by the resources available on the TaskBank. And yes, and you also mentioned the infrastructure that you already have, the TBLT YouTube channel and the task journal, and also some amazing work by Caitlyn through the Star Talk. And I think you are so mature. Yeah, we have a lot to learn from you as well. And yes, also the the upcoming news about the additive volume. We look forward to that, and also the AI reviewer. And it sounds really exciting, and I really can't wait to hear in the near future about how AI reviewer actually works for
Thank you.
for the task bank. And yeah, it's great to see that you are expanding and more people are getting involved in the task bank. And let's see if the audience have any feedback or questions about how to use the task bank in their own context.
Great. Can I pop in really quick with one thing that you just
Yes.
mentioned? Thank you so much for that summary too. I really appreciate what the takeaways were from you because that's really helpful for us. I want to mention two things. One is that the Task Bank, although I said it was founded in 2020, the initial pilot version was in 2014, and it came out of response in a graduate seminar with my students. So I want to credit especially Carly Henderson, who's now Carly Carver, and Angel Mia Munoz, who created a WordPress version of that. So I think also it's so great to be able to create things with students and then later have them formalized with or associations or whatever it may be. But they do have credit on the front page of the task bank, but I wanted to mention that explicitly. And then with the task, with the AI portion, I mentioned Roger Hilibert. He has a task gen. It's called the task gen out of the Universitat de Barcelona. You can actually create tasks with AI. And one of our collaboration points with him is that we want to connect the task gen and the task bank. So you could presumably go to his website if you didn't have a task, create one using AI, and then send it over to the task bank. And then we will be using AI as well to say, like, okay, of the tasks that are uploaded that were created by people, how many fit the criteria, what kind of feedback or what kind of gaps are there potentially, or are they all ready to go? Versus with AI and the task gen, which has been trained to focus on TBLT tasks, how many are immediately moving from one place to the other. So we're just trying to cut down the effort that people have to make when they're trying to create and share these resources with the field. So I wanted to mention those two things. And now we're ready for questions. Thanks. Unless Caitlyn has anything else to pop in on.
Sounds amazing. So people, if you have any, you can describe your contacts and ask, Laura or Caitlyn where you should start, what search terms you might use, or any questions about the workflow of designing or implementing TBLT. This is your chance. While people are thinking, I have a question. Like, I wonder if the TBLT task bank has some tasks you hope people to submit more on your website.
That's such a good question. Caitlyn, do you want to? I'm happy to say that as well. I just don't want to talk
Yeah,
all the time.
well, I can share a little bit about what I hope that you can maybe share about what you hope. I'm really stemming from my work with the teacher education program that I mentioned through formerly the Georgetown Star Talk. Workshops, teachers are really interested in order to have success implementing TBLT as a kind of pedagogy as opposed to just individual tasks. There is a need for tasks that are in sequence. And so I'm really looking forward to submissions from teachers and researchers who have designed a sequence of tasks that can be searched as such and implemented kind of in a more holistic way, whether that be for a unit or just 4 tasks that went really well together and were kind of designed and manipulated intentionally to direct learners' attention or ability to do an increasingly complicated interaction. We've got a little preview. We've got a collection of submissions that were just uploaded maybe a week ago. So they're kind of in process, but that is what I'm looking forward to.
I'm excited about that too, Caitlin. I'm also excited about how to, because we've had a couple of requests now for TBLT implementation. Like, what did someone use this task and how did it work and how does it look? And so we've kind of discussed how that would work on the website because we wanted to stay a really positive place where I mean, we want real life, right? But we also don't want people saying like, oh, this didn't work for me. We want it to be a place where people can upload and have positive feedback or adjust it accordingly. So it wouldn't be like a Yelp review, for example. We don't want reviews like that or stars. But we have thought about creating a place and maybe linking it with a TBLT YouTube channel. So again, having that cross collaboration, cross pollination with other initiatives of having short videos of people actually implementing the task. So here's the task, and then here's how it was implemented. It just takes a very special context in terms of permissions to allow that kind of thing to be allowed online and to make it meaningful. Because I think if we blur out everyone's face, it would be difficult. Thank you for that, Caitlin. And we put in the chat the TBLT YouTube site link. I also put in the Teacher Researcher Educational Community, Laura Byfonsky at Georgetown, the International Association for TBLT, and then the TBLT Special Interest Group from the IAPL, the International Association for the Psychology of Language Learning. So if you want to join something with all the acronyms, you have an option. If you want to join the International Association for TBLT, we meet in person every 2 years, including next year. And then it's just a really good, great place. But our goal again is to make sure that we serve the community in a particular way and that we connect as much as possible with the other resources that exist out there.
Thank you so much. And yes, people can pop in to ask questions anytime or give any feedback. In the meantime, I have a second question for me. That is, I noticed that the whole TBLT Task Bank website is hosted by Lawrence University, Indiana
Not
University.
anymore.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay, it's because I was okay. Yes, I was wondering about the logistics side of things, like how much support you get from your institution or from the wider community.
So it was housed when we started it, it was at IU. And so that was one of the questions. So I had that practice site in 2014. And then when I was on the board of TBLT, originally not as president, but as an ordinary member. And we were talking about, we need a website, whatever it may be, to have tasks. And I was like, well, I actually have one. We could formalize it and make it more professional. The question there was, and this is something that the book will cover too, like how did we set up the website? What kinds of decisions? Because it is a decision, right? Like, do you want to house it institutionally? Do you want to house it independently where there's additional costs? How much storage might you need? And so I'm hoping that we also answer those questions in the book of how much storage each site kind of currently has at its current time, just to give people an idea. If you're creating a site, you have to answer those questions. So it made sense for us at the beginning to have it at IU because they allowed me, and I'm so grateful to the university for giving me this space for free. You had to have certain branding requirements, like IU had to be at the top and all these different components. But unfortunately, when last year we had a breach, a security breach at IU, the website got frozen for a couple weeks. So I'm a more cautious person, and we already had a backup site. So we just made the backup site go live. So I would really encourage you, if you're creating a site that ends up becoming a bigger thing than you expected, once it hits a certain point, I think having an independent backup site is really important, a site that just you control, that no outside entity controls. Because if once you are at the control of somebody else, then if something happens, you can't do anything about it, right? And so because people use this for research and teaching, it needs to be reliable and online. And it's much less of a target being an independent site for language researchers and teachers than it is to be a major research university. And then I've also heard things like there's another one of the bigger sites that is currently moving from places, right? That I'm sure you know about is so when it's institutionally tied and the researcher in charge moves, it becomes a very big deal to transfer ownership. So I would encourage you to be as independent as possible. So that way, no matter what's happening institutionally, sociopolitically, or just personally with moving, there's less of those complications. There's a little bit of cost involved, but it's manageable so far. Great questions. And the other thing I will say too is with the task bank workshops, we have the next one coming out in May. And we have both a practitioner and a teacher trainer engaged. And this was coming out directly from feedback from the group. And so people were saying, we'd love to hear from practitioners. We had a much more research focused series of task bank workshops last year, and this year we're really focusing on practitioner focused workshops. So we're very responsive. If you're saying, oh, I'd love to learn about this, whatever topic it may be, and we haven't had that topic yet because we make all the workshops available for free, the recordings, please email us too. We'd be happy to put something together, especially if you're like, I'd love to hear this topic, and here are some ideas on who could be a great speaker for that. I'll put it in the chat again. Great. Well, you have our emails. I put help@thetaskbank.com and my email too if you have any questions. So we're happy to have the conversation offline whenever you're comfortable, but we really appreciate the invitation today and having you all join us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. And well, if nobody else has any questions, then we could probably wrap up.
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay, so thank you so much again, Laura and Caitlyn, and I really appreciate your time and effort for putting the everything together and answering our questions. And I wish the task bank could be used by more people and the task can be implemented and yes, I wish your community will thrive and our community for open applied linguistics will thrive together as well.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Thank you.
thank
Have a great one.
you.
Bye
Bye,
all.
everyone.